Welcome to Inspire Saratoga, a show that highlights the people and stories that make our home a place of strength, inspiration, and success. I'm Michael Kurkowski, physical and mental performance coach and resident of Saratoga Springs. And in this show, my mission is to connect with the great people who also call this place home, hear about their work and what they do for this town, and share their insights and experiences in health, wealth, and happiness for you, my neighbors. Thank you for joining me wherever you are in town. Let's dive in. What's up, Diane?
Hi,
How are we
Mike.
doing?
Good. How are you?
It's good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to.
Awesome. Yeah, so for the listener, quick, I am with Diane Webb, one of the most inspiring people that I get to connect with. I've known you for a while now, but just the work that you've done in the field of mental health and all the work that you're doing, I was really excited to have you on the show to talk about more all the things that you've been doing, new life events that are going on with new family, and really just dive into everything that's going on with you.
Well, thanks. Anytime you invite me to do something like this, I'm happy to do it. Happy to see ya.
Yeah, we've been doing this a while. This is like our,
Yeah.
I think, fourth time from the old podcast and now
Right.
coming into this one.
I think so. Yeah. So thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
Always, yeah. So to kick off, I'd like to know a little bit about your time in Saratoga. Now you live in Saratoga.
Mhm.
How long have you lived there?
So I moved here when my oldest was 3. When you're a mom, that's how you measure time, is through your kids. So it's been about 7 years now already.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what brought you to this area?
So my back then my family had to relocate here for work purposes, and I actually lived in a different part of the Capital District for the first couple of years and realized I was always going to Saratoga for culture, for food, for fun. So finally I was like, okay, let's just move up there, and here we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about living in this area in Saratoga?
You know, that's such a loaded question. There's so many things, but for me, I love the intersection between nature and culture that is so unique to Saratoga. Like we have a small city, but we're nestled in the Adirondacks. So you have the mountains, you have lakes, but then you have, the Saratoga Performing Arts, so you have that. Everything is at your fingertips, museums, wonderful food. And I just love that about our area.
Yeah, that's interesting. The combination of nature and culture. I haven't thought about it that way, but it is like there's so much beautiful open landscape in the area.
Right.
But there's also kind of a little city feel to it as well, like from the downtown spot.
Right. I mean, we're so lucky to have all of it, Yeah.
Yeah. Now, where are you from originally?
Syracuse. So not too far, just like a couple hours away is where I grew up anyways. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. Now, all the work that you do, it's with Grace Mental Health Counseling, and you've opened this place. Now I've got multiple locations in here, a lot of therapists. You're building this really fast, working with.
We have, yes. But, a lot of it is, it's funny, like we were joking even before this interview about how it's an empire. And I'm like, I don't know about that, because a lot of it is timing, like we built this business. We had our first location of our counseling center about 6.5 years ago or so. Actually, you know what? I think it was just 6 years ago this month in September. And since then, the world has changed dramatically, right? So when COVID happened and people were really honoring their mental health needs more than ever before, it was an opportunity to really meet the needs of our community by having more and more therapists. And then as the quarantine stopped and people were coming back, into offices again, to offer more and more offices. So I think that our growth is it's more complicated than just us growing the business. It's kind of like a sign of the times right now that people are really honoring their mental health way more. One of the jokes that my clients and I share is that in the 90s, even if you said you were having a bad day, that was considered like an overshare. People were like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Really?
Like back
Okay.
then. Do you remember that?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. But it's hard to even remember because nowadays, right? Like we're talking about trauma, we're talking about grief, hardship, we're talking about it openly, Gen Z. A lot of them will say, well, my therapist told me this and my therapist told me that. Like these conversations are so new, right? So I think that the rapid growth of With Grace mental health counseling is a lot about where we are culturally, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like, in the age that I am in, like, the generation, like, it's kind of, we've lived in two different times, like, it was pre-internet and post-internet, like,
Right.
I remember growing up was like the 50s, like, we didn't have cell phones, and like, you know, we went out for the day and like nobody knew where you were until you came
Right.
home for dinner. Now we're still living in, you know, post that, where everybody's connected.
Yeah.
But I didn't think about it as much as, yeah, growing up, doing therapy or even talking about like your mental health was really not something that you shared much outside of maybe your immediate family or with, you know, close people. Now it does seem like it's much more open to be, you know, to go and seek somebody out, you know, from
Right.
there and speak it.
Mhm.
Did you see that trend kind of coming in this last 6 years of realizing when the times were changing of, oh, like this is going to be a time like people are going to need to speak more about their mental health?
Well, how can I answer that concisely?
Sure.
Um, so I graduated with my graduate degree in mental health counseling in 2008, right? And so I have a unique view of it because when I graduated, it was still pretty taboo to talk about therapy or to go to therapy at that time. You know, so there's been a huge revolution during my career about understanding what therapy is, being open about it, the stigma of mental health being reduced dramatically, you know. So I can say I don't know if I like saw it coming, but I have been so happy to witness it.
Mhm.
You know, it's like to me, it's like a dream come true. When I was younger and was really struggling, and people didn't seem to understand, you know, trauma or depression, um, and it was stigmatizing. I would have loved for this, you know,
Mhm.
for people to understand what I meant by, oh, I'm experiencing trauma, or I feel impacted by my trauma, or even just saying that you have a therapist and that not being like this uber big deal, you know.
Right.
So it's really just been what a blessing to bear witness to it, you know. So more than like predicting it, it's just been like celebratory, like, oh, this is wonderful, like this is like the best thing for everybody, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think was some of the big causes of the change of going from where it was more taboo or something you kept more close to the vest, where now it is much more open? I know there's things like the culture and how we communicate is much different nowadays, but from your experience, do you see, are there any like kind of the longest levers that have seen like made that big change from it being something you don't really speak to now something that's much more open to
Mhm.
go and explore?
Like all things, I think that there's many different factors that create it together, you know. People might be surprised to hear me say this, but I think that social media is one of those things. Social media is very powerful because people are sharing something. They might be more courageous to share it on a screen, something more personal or vulnerable. But then the impact has been to reduce the stigma about what we're experiencing emotionally, you know, and sometimes for better or worse, you know what I mean? Like certainly oversharing is not really
Sure,
right,
exactly.
but just to simply say, like the Me Too movement, for example, right? This happened to me too, and then people online feeling more comfortable of I went through this as well, you know. I think that COVID happening, right, and people being forced into quarantine, I think that was um, pretty pretty hard for a lot of people, if not traumatic for a lot of people, right? So, you know, all of us went through it together, and I think that that really did what I observed is that it changed the way that we think about mental health, right? That it's not something you put off for tomorrow, that it's best to be proactive, that it's good to really attune to your emotions and heal them and honor them. Um, and then also just like the evolution of humanity as well, spiritually and emotionally. I think that we're just moving into a place where we're seeing our wellness in a more holistic way than we did before. Certainly more than we did in the 90s. I mean, that's to be sure, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In what ways do you think, like, more holistically?
So there's a lot of research going on about, emotional wellness and the impact on the physical body, which I know you could probably speak to that very well too. Whereas before, especially like, in the 1990s or and before, certainly there was this idea that the head and the physical body were like separate entities and should be treated as separate entities, right? And there's a long history of that throughout scientific research, and of course, like now that seems crazy, but it's good that that seems
Right.
crazy to us, so now we understand that your emotional wellness, how you're perceiving things, impacts what happens in your body, and then vice versa, right? So
Right.
when we're thinking about our wellness, we're not just thinking about our physical health, right? We're also thinking about our mental health now.
Right. Yeah. Well, as you know, my other podcast, The Strength Connection, I've named it that because everything's interlinked together,
Right.
you know?
Yes.
But it is interesting because, as you said, like, it can be very easy to get jaded from what we used to think of not like 20 years ago, and that was the norm. And now you think like, oh my God, how can you think like that? That's so
Right.
crazy. Like, well, you only know what you know, and times change all the time. So
Right.
now I see that. And so one thing I saw is coming from fitness and like the physical body self, I found a lot that with information and social media out there, it's great because people can share and get a lot of information now and they can get it very quickly.
Right.
But also what comes from that is a lot of misinformation and misguidance in that as well.
That definitely can and does happen. For example, there was a huge trend on TikTok about diagnosing dissociative identity disorder, which is an incredibly rare psychiatric disorder, is what they call it. I don't really love that term, when it comes to mental health. And so it was really unfortunate for people who really do have what's called DID, because of the misinformation that was spread, or the idea that like you could, because this dissociative identity disorder is about someone that has multiple personality states in their mind because of extreme trauma. So it does happen, but it's very, very rare that that happens. It has to be a very high level of trauma very early in life.
Yeah.
So when this happened on TikTok, a lot of people that do have DID were very upset by that because of the misinformation about
Sure.
what they actually have and what they're actually challenged by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy that something like that can get such a trend on something like TikTok, because that's like such a deeply personal thing, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, it is, because I come from the realm of like, physical fitness and training and stuff like it's important, but it's, to have something specifically with trauma, like that's such a personal thing out there
Right.
that I don't see it as much. And the reason I brought it up kind of with the misinformation is you're an expert in trauma. And I think that's one of the words that is out there a lot that's often gets misconstrued, or people don't understand it as much about what it actually is. So
Right.
yeah. So in like, what is like trauma, I guess, in a definition sense and experience, and what is it also not that maybe some people maybe get in the misinterpretation of?
So trauma, more than what the event is that happens to somebody, is more about what the brain does in response to a highly stressful event.
Mhm.
So trauma is a neurological reaction to feeling incredibly stressed and threatened in some way. It's actually, I feel that it's an adaptive thing in our brain, right? So just hear me out. So when our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, right, and they were in the woods, hunting for something, like we're talking about thousands upon thousands of years ago, right? If they ran into a bear and her cubs in this part of the woods, right, they would want to either freeze or flee, right?
Right.
And so the brain would do something automatically to help you to do that. So your whole system is now galvanized to skedaddle or to completely freeze and play dead, right? At the same time, you'd be encoding exactly where you are in the woods so that you can remember where you were and not go and hunt in that part of the woods again, right?
Right.
So what happens with a traumatic incident, like let's say someone's in a car accident in modern times, right? Their whole system is going to be galvanized with anxiety. They might feel like they want to jump out of their skin, or they might completely freeze up, right? At the same time, they're remembering every single like detail of the scene. Then after the fact of the car accident, they might have intrusive thoughts where they remember with very vivid details about what happened and where they were. Later they might have nightmares about it, for example, right? So all of these symptoms that I'm describing are PTSD or trauma response. But again, it's about that more than a specific event, right?
Okay.
So example, there could be people that have combat experience and understandably so, many of them will develop trauma reactions to that, but not all of them do, right?
Yeah.
So in the other hand, someone might have a car accident. There could be two people involved in the car accident. One of them has trauma reactions, one of them doesn't. And that's why trauma is less about like the specific thing and more about how the person responds to it, right?
Right.
Okay, so it used to be talking about stigma or how its mental health has changed over the course of the past 20 years. It used to be that people would say, oh, well, I didn't have combat experience, so how could I have trauma? I can't count how many times I used to hear people say that, right? But of course, you can have trauma from a lot of different things, right? From a sudden loss, from witnessing something horrific, right? There could be all different reasons to have that trauma response. So it's really the reaction for the person. Did I answer your question well?
I think it's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me that I got is oftentimes we say like a traumatic event, right? But it's technically not the event that's traumatic, it's the response to it that the person has from the event.
Right. Like sometimes I hear people say like, well, is that really traumatic? And that's actually not the right question. It's, did the person experience that as traumatic? That's actually the more accurate question when it comes to that.
Right. Yeah, it's because it's an interesting topic that you see now, specifically in culture, because people want to say like this is traumatic and this isn't. Oh, this person experienced. No, you're not experiencing, trauma. It's like, well, you can't decipher that from one person to another, as you said,
Right.
with the example of a car accident. Like two people might be in it. One might have a severe reaction to it, while the other person might walk off and it doesn't, like nothing happens to them from
Right.
there. Yeah. So
Exactly.
is there a way that is there certain things that like happen or we can see from somebody that would determine like why one person would have a response to it that's more traumatic versus another? Like take like an example of like the car wreck, like why one person gets it versus the other. Do we know kind of why one gets it and one doesn't?
We do and we don't,
Mhm.
so again, like all things, there's usually a whole lot of factors that lead to something,
Mhm.
right? So why someone might experience a trauma reaction and one person does not to the same thing, it could have to do with actual genetics. It could have to do with pre-existing anxiety or depression. It could have to do with how they perceive the event or something that it might have reminded them in the past. If someone felt more threatened by the event than the other, and I could go on and on. So
Yeah.
in order to be concise, like there's like a multitude of factors
Sure.
that all kind of come together for that expression for that individual.
Right, yeah.
Mhm.
So if somebody is not sure if they're experiencing trauma or like maybe after something that happened and they're feeling a little bit off, but they don't necessarily know, is this trauma? Do I need to go see somebody or not? Are there specific things that like you would like show somebody like if you're experiencing this, yeah, it's probably something that you should go speak to somebody like yourself about?
Yes, well, I am a biased perspective on this. I'm like, just go, like
Yeah,
why not?
Why
right?
not? Yeah.
I mean, to me, I think everyone would benefit from therapy in
Mhm.
some way, That said, I think that, from a clinical perspective, right? If someone is a part of something that we would classically agree is traumatic,
Mhm.
let's just say, for simplicity's sake. For the next 2 weeks, you could have acute trauma reactions to that. And that's not like a sign of something that needs to be treated,
Mhm.
like within 2 weeks. That just is kind of the brain responding to something that happened
Mhm.
in a very predictable way, right? But if it lasts, and again, this is different for everybody, but if it lasts beyond 2 weeks, then we would say, okay, like that's what we would actually call a more of a trauma reaction in the clinical sense, right? So if someone, let's just go back to a car accident because we've been using that example.
Sure.
Someone has a car accident, they're having some, intrusive thoughts for the next couple of weeks. And of course, depending on the severity of that, that would be understandable, right? And that might more easily go away. But if it persists, beyond that, and then is also accompanied by hypervigilance, more intense anxiety, depression, difficulty concentrating,
Mhm.
nightmares that are persisting, difficulty falling asleep, or maybe even sleeping way more than you're used to, then we're saying, okay, that's more like the PTSD, range.
Gotcha, okay. Yeah. Now, another thing along with trauma, you talk a lot about manifestation.
I do.
I love that word. It's an interesting word. And I think it's one of those words that like everybody might have a little bit different understand or a little bit different definition of what that is.
Mhm.
In your mind, like what does manifestation mean? How do you define that?
So I have two parts of me in my career, and obviously one of them is a trauma therapist. And the other part is I do a lot of high performance and success coaching with people about manifestation, right? Using the brain and what we know about the brain and what we know about emotional wellness to help them with that. I feel very drawn to talk about manifestation because it's so misunderstood, right? So basically, manifestation is creating a new reality around yourself, right? And there's a lot of what we call mainstream manifestation that encourages people just to visualize what they want and it will happen, or just think about it and it will come to fruition. And this has really disserviced people a great deal, because, for example, let's say that you were for some reason you were led to believe that creating a business was very difficult, right? And everyone gave you that programming from the time you were little until you grew up. It was like, oh no, don't do that. That's dangerous. That's scary. Don't ever start your own business. Just get a nice pension and yada yada, and you're gonna be good, right? That's what they heard their whole life. So when it comes time, if they really desire to build their own business, if that person has all of that programming from their personal history for decades, then all like just the visualization in the world is not going to take it away and make
Right.
it easy to start their own business, right? So
Right.
to me, it's like to tell people that you can just like think about something and it's going to come to reality is not helpful.
Uh-huh.
The truth is, if that person desired to start their own business, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with having a pension. I wish I had a pension. Like, let's just be clear,
Totally
just
get it,
using
yeah.
this as an example, But if someone truly desired to have their own business, but realize that they've been encouraged not to for a long time, and we were talking about it, I would help them in the process of rooting out that programming,
Mhm.
right? Because that deep-seated belief that it's such a hard thing to do and that it's a struggle would be creating internal resistance
Mhm.
when they are filing their taxes for their new business, when they're naming their business, when they're getting it off the ground, right? All of that would be very present and they would have to work through it,
Mhm.
right? But if someone does that work to change their underlying beliefs about what they want to manifest, then it's just so much easier,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so much that I've been down that road personally myself of thinking everything's supposed to be hard in it, and it's a hard thing to get over.
Yeah.
And that, right? I'm curious though, why do you think that kind of mainstream message catches people so much? Sometimes I think like from building a business and doing hard things before, like
Mhm.
I just kind of almost consciously know, like, yeah, you can't just think about something and then it's magically going to appear.
Right.
But I can see a lot of people do fall into that, of like seeing that message, and they get a lot of people to kind of follow in line on that. Why do you think that message is very powerful for a lot of people, like that mainstream message?
So I think that there's so many things I want to say about that. One of them is that people are still learning about the power of what they have been exposed to and their experiences as it relates to the present. Now, when I say that, I actually don't want people to over focus on the past. I want them to account for their past in order to build for their future with more ease, right?
Okay.
So I think that there's that. The other thing is a lot of people would rather not have to do that, right? They want it to be easy. They want a quantum leap into a new reality without having to reprogram past pain or trauma or how it might have shaped their subconscious mind, right? It's so much easier to think, oh, I don't have to do that. Roger that. Great. I'm not going to do that, right? But the truth is, we can't get away from our subconscious programming. It's always with us,
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting in the world of being in fitness for so long. I see so many different videos of like this, like the struggle, and like it's got to be hard, like it's got to be like wake up early in the morning and grind and struggle. And I look at these videos and would see, oh, this is such a message that's building in that it's supposed to be so hard to get in good shape. It's supposed to
Right.
be so challenging. And we think, yeah, it's like motivating to see that reel in there, and it maybe gives you an emotional lift, like, oh yeah, like I can do hard things. But I never thought, like, yeah, subconsciously it's telling you, like, yeah, to get in shape is really hard. I'm saying it's not easy, but it's very simple to do it.
Yes. To your point, I love that example because if your subconscious programming is that something is going to be a grind, right? Then you're going to experience it that way. Like your own expectations of what's going to happen is the most powerful manifestation tool of all. I can't stress it enough. And so when I'm doing manifestation coaching with people, the first thing I'm looking at is what do you expect to happen? Right? Let's start there. Right. So if you really want this to happen, but your expectations is this, then immediately I'm intervening right there,
Mm.
because there's all these like little tiny micro decisions and micro movements that happen between you and your expectations. So let's say that person that's going to build that business, right? They might network a little bit less because underlying they don't actually believe that it's going to get off the ground easily, right? So they don't put as much energy into it. There's that tiny little micro decision, but then energetically it really changes things, right? So if you can really help someone to put their expectations, rightly so, to what they really can create, then again it's just easier.
Yeah. You wrote a line about this that I loved. It said, manifestation, it's not about believing it until it comes to fruition. It's about believing in yourself so much that you realize your own limitlessness.
That's it. That's exactly it. I wish people understood this. I'm so fired up about this. I even signed with a book publisher last week so I can write a whole book about it because to me, this is like such an important thing. I genuinely want people to be the happiest, healthiest, fully expressed version of themselves. It's why I've done everything I've done. It's just for that. Because I think that all of us being the fully expressed, happiest version of ourselves is best for humanity. It's best for the world. It's best for our kids. Right?
Yeah. So when you get into stuff like manifestation, I found a lot of people, even with this subconscious thought of like it's going to be hard or it's not like the best message that they have, still can find some success. Like they're still doing good things, but then they want to get to that next level from there.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
how do you approach kind of with people who are kind of trying to get to that next level and kind of get into that subconscious? Are there specific practices or specific things that you aim to know about the person to help them kind of reach to get to that next level?
Yes.
Mhm.
So a lot of times people have a grind that they're really good at, right? And so they can certainly, people can achieve success by doing this 100%, you know, but are they really fulfilled? Do they feel happy, you know? So there's a difference between like a hustle and a grind versus the full expression of you know? What I would say to someone who they're saying to themselves, I feel successful, but I want to get up to a new chapter of my personal success. I would say the first things to look at is what you truly want. Create a very good blueprint for yourself, right? Because how are you supposed to go to a destination if you don't have a destination, right? So there's that. The second thing is look at what you think is possible, right? So if you have some whispers inside of you that another layer of success is not possible for you, that's a good place to start, you know. Look at how you see yourself. Because if you have limitations on yourself, that's probably creating some resistance to that next level of success that you want for yourself. The next thing is nervous system. It's such an well, people are talking about more and more, but it still doesn't get, I think, the attention it deserves for the amount of impact that it has on us, right? So it could be, what are the limits of your nervous system? You know, so one thing that I hear frequently, especially now in the online world, someone who wants more visibility online, but their nervous system goes haywire when they go to record reels or write content, you know, for social media. And I get it, you know, it can be very uncomfortable doing those things,
Sure.
right? So if your nervous system is getting triggered and preventing you from doing those things, then there is resistance there. So looking at the limits of your own nervous system is a very powerful thing to do.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, this is deep work. Sometimes it's not on the surface to answer these questions about like what you
Right.
truly want and like how do you feel. I know like from doing work, oftentimes those aren't things that are immediately like the first thought that's coming into your mind. It takes some time to actually figure out what are your limitations, like what do you truly want.
Mhm.
So with those practices, are there specific things that you found best ways to approach that? Is it a journaling practice? Is it walks? Is it like breath work? Is it like what's like some specific things that you found really impactful for people to help answer these questions?
So when I work with people one-on-one, a big part of it is understanding what's best for them. Because some people get a lot out of journaling. Some people journaling is actually takes them away from themselves in a way, you know.
Mhm.
So I would say looking at those things, you know, your nervous system, your perceptions, how you see possibility, just look at those broad categories and questions and then integrate it in things that you know bring you into your intuitive wisdom, right? So if breath work helps you communicate with your own intuition and get into your own hear your own voice more clearly, then do that. If it's journaling, then do that. Like whatever it is. Sometimes people just need to sit in silence more, right? To be able to really think about these questions and be able to see it. We're surrounded by input from things all the time these days, you know? So just, you know, getting away from technology for a little bit and really just in silent reflection can be really helpful. In a podcast interview I did last week, she asked a really good question about, well, a lot of what you're talking about is, you know, your past programming and something happening that has now led you to have these subconscious beliefs that might be having resistance for what you want to manifest. And people find that on their own. The answer is some people can, right? So it's not like no one can do that, but the nature of what it is makes it hard because if it's in the subconscious, it's inherently hard for you to see,
Exactly.
right? Yeah. So I would say if someone is spending time in reflection, looking at these things for themselves, trying to investigate this, and they feel like they're spinning their wheels, you know, it would be a good time to hire therapist or a coach or whatever feels in alignment for them to go a bit deeper. You know, like there's nothing wrong with getting an expert to help you to do something with more ease that you find hard to do. Like could I ever fix my own car? Maybe. It would take me an enormously long time.
Right.
I would
The
have to
the
research
speed
it.
of getting it complete, yeah.
Right, yeah. So, you know, when I have car problems, I take it to my mechanic.
There it is, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, like with the nervous system and that change in state, I think it's interesting because a lot of people are probably they've lived in such this state of heightened nervous system from these experiences that they don't even know what to look for in that change of state of asking a question if they're on the right path or so. So when they find the right answer of like what they truly want or find like now they're on the right path, what is that physical change in the nervous system? What's happening there? Is it a more calming state? Is it a ease of breath? Like, what do you see, or maybe what do you coach people to kind of lean into the feelings that they might experience?
So, so for my manifestation coaching, I do quite a bit of online marketing, right? And I remember when I first started recording reels, when it was like a new thing, I would feel tight. I would feel like um, anxious, you know, I would feel like my chest was tight. So those are all signs of my nervous system responding to that, right? Now I record reels. I literally don't even think about it. I might as well be changing my baby's diaper. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel any different, you know, because I normalize that activity for myself, right? So what we're looking at is in accordance to your goals, where is your nervous system responding, making something more difficult? And how can I help move you into a place of ease with that, right? And that could be a lot of different things, you know, like someone that wants to have a podcast, right? Like if they had difficulty with visibility and visibility was making them feel anxious, then help them move into a place where visibility was more comfortable for them, right? So they'll be looking at where you used to feel like your nervous system was getting hyped up, right? Now it feels like it's just natural for me. I'm in a flow state when I do this.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because it's like it seems very like almost common sense of it, like, oh, this is it. But I know like so many who don't even like know the intuition and the feel. So I think that example of it and just guiding things through is so powerful.
Oh,
So,
thanks. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I've got some rapid fire questions for you. I wanted to throw out to close out. Okay.
Yeah.
Just have some fun here. So, favorite movie that you've watched over and over again?
Ratatouille.
Okay.
Yeah,
You know, I just
easy.
saw that for the first time. Like,
Isn't
a
it
month ago.
great?
It's unbelievable.
Wholesome, about food. It's perfect.
Oh, it's
Disney.
the best. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Favorite restaurant in Saratoga?
Oh man. Favorite restaurant. You know what? Those noodles at 15 Church are delicious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good spot.
yeah. So
Beautiful.
I'd say that. I
Okay.
mean, I love that dish specifically, but I love that restaurant.
Yeah, it's a beautiful ambiance. So, window or aisle seat?
Oh, definitely aisle.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
need to get up and down.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've had so many
claustrophobic.
I've had so many window people rolling through.
Oh.
I was like, no, I need the aisle.
Oh, inside there, you gotta like do that shimmy. To
No,
get
I want
out.
to get up and down. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Favorite concert that you've attended?
So when I was 12, I went to a Dave Matthews Band before he really popped off, and it was like very cool. You know, it wasn't overcrowded, and it was remarkable. I'll never forget it.
Wow. Okay, you're a big concert person now. So looking all the way back at 12,
Yeah,
that's an impact.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Famous person, dead or alive, that you'd love to have dinner with?
Oh man. Ed Casey. Yeah, is that his name?
Tell me about it.
He was into hypnosis, and he was called a medical medium. He's one of the founders of hypnosis, and I have a lot of questions, so probably that guy.
Okay, all right. Have not had Ed Casey. I haven't answered yet. Best advice that you've ever been given?
Um. hmm. No, I can't say I have been given a lot of good advice, actually.
Okay.
A lot of my story is just like not listening to the advice that was given to me, you know? But you know what? My father used to tell me that I should be with a guy that loved me more than himself. And that was really good advice.
Okay. What about the worst advice you've ever been given?
To invest in Bitcoin.
Okay.
Sorry to everyone who does Bitcoin.
All right. Last one. Who inspires you currently the most in your life?
My business partner, Nicole Edwards. Easy. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
So, Diane Webb, thank you so much for jumping on. Seriously, I love speaking with you. Anytime I get a chance to sit down and connect with you is great.
Thank
So
you.
I appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. If you want to check out more of everything that you've got going on, where can they go?
So our practice with Grace Mental Health, we are in Saratoga County with a few locations. In terms of my coaching business, you can find me on Facebook at Diane Webb.
Perfect. Awesome.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Listeners, thank you so much. Connect you on the next one. Peace.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope you got some great value from this episode and a little more insight into some inspiring work happening right in this town. If you want to know more about our guests' work and check out more of what they are doing, please click on the links in the show notes below. And along with that, check out the direct link to 5-Minute Mindset. This is a 5-minute video that gives you the 2 best practices that you can do every day in 5 minutes that will create a major impact in your mental strength and resilience. If you are on your own mission to become physically and mentally stronger, these practices will be a serious game changer for you. Seriously. Thank you again for joining me today. I'll see you on the next one.